News here, fellas. Our Adrian Wojnarowski is reporting that Brooklyn finalized a buyout with Dwight Howard, clearing way for him to sign a 2-year, $11 million deal with Washington. League sources telling ESPN the deal includes a player option, and Howard's $23.8 million salary will need to go unclaimed through waivers before he can ultimately sign with the Wizards. Stephen A., you like this move?
Well, I like it from a talent perspective. From a locker room presence, absolutely not. It's not just that Dwight Howard has had trouble at first in Atlanta and as recently as in Charlotte, where Mitch Kupchak basically pushed him right out the door, one of his first moves, because nobody in the locker room wanted him there. Here's the problem. I got a problem with the Wizards locker room. I got a problem with Bradley Beal, John Wall, Otto Porter. I know Gortat is going after Wall cussed him out, and Gortat wanted to quit since Wall MF'd him earlier in the season. We get all of that, and I'm not casting aspersions on Beal or Wall. I'm simply saying the locker room is relatively temperamental, and when you take that into account, all right, and you consider Scott Brooks as the coach who wants no parts of confrontation. It's well known throughout NBA circles. He doesn't want confrontation as a coach, doesn't deal with it particularly well. You have Dwight Howard in a locker room with the recent reputation that he had, coupled with John Wall, coupled with Bradley Beal and those guys. You're looking for leadership from your franchise players, and it's very, very hard to come by because they're still learning how to be leaders. And you got a guy that's a 3-time Defensive Player of the Year, once wearing Superman capes, and we forgot his nickname. All we call him now is Dwight Howard. And you got that coming into the nation's capital. It is a challenge. I hope it works out because I think Dwight Howard actually is a good guy. All of those guys are good guys, but when you have them in a locker room together and you don't have a strong-minded coach who's willing to bring down the hammer, you can potentially have a problem. And that's the reservation that I have with the Washington Wizards with these moves. Talent-wise, I'm fine. But the personalities in that locker room, coupled with Scott Brooks, is where my trepidation kicks in, Max.
I'm with you there. This is a debate show. I'd like to debate it with you, but I'm with you there. As I said with Carmelo Anthony, when the price falls on a certain level of talent to a low enough number in a cap league, and it's league with a salary cap, it's tough to say no to that. And so Carmelo Anthony at $5 million or less, I think he could help a lot of teams. And you'd think the same thing with Dwight Howard, but I want to piggyback your locker room point. I was doing L.A. drive time, afternoon drive radio with Marcellus Wiley, 7:10 a.m. in Los Angeles. And we were the home of the Lakers. And I was in that locker room at times, when let's not forget, Kobe and Pau got blown out by the Mavs. They've been to 3 straight finals, 1 back-to-back. Then the Mavs blew them out, swept them on their way to winning the championship against that Miami squad. So the next year, the Lakers get they remember the league turned down the Chris Paul trade. They traded Pau and Odom for Chris Paul. It was turned down. Instead, they got Steve Nash and Dwight Howard. It was the cover of Sports Illustrated. Steve Nash and Dwight Howard. Oh, my God, with Kobe and Pau. But Steve Nash's body disintegrated. Dwight was able to play. And by the way, he had a good defensive year. At a certain point, Kobe Bryant staged essentially a mutiny on the team, took the team away from D'Antoni with a bad back, took the team away from D'Antoni. He captained the offense, and Dwight captained the defense, and they won a whole bunch of games and made the playoffs from a position where they were going to miss the playoffs. But, guys, I was in that locker room a couple times where I saw Dwight Howard go into one room, the rest of the team came out of that room. Yep. Dwight Howard went back to where he was, the rest of the team went into the other room. That's the truth. And I don't know if at $5 million or any price you want that problem, particularly on a team with locker room problems.
You need a strong-minded coach, and you need a strong-minded organization. Ernie Grunfeld has been around a long time, used to be with the Knicks, then Milwaukee. His reputation speaks for itself in terms of a basketball mind that he is. But he ceded power to a coach that doesn't like to deal with confrontation. Ernie is not prone to deal with it himself. And I don't know how good this is going to be for that locker room. They've improved talent-wise, but that locker room, I wonder.
Yeah, that's not worth any price. All right, guys. So with LeBron heading to the Lakers, I want to keep this moving. A different subject here. Is it time to blow things up in Cleveland? So The Athletic reported earlier this week that the Cavs would be open to trading Kevin Love, who has 2 years left on his deal. Max, I'll start with you. Let's keep in mind he's born in California, played his college ball at UCLA, so has ties to LA, but also was raised in Oregon. Where do you think he should want to go?
Before I say anything, they're going to blow things up in Cleveland. It's like you go to a demolition site. There's nothing left but smoldering ash. And people say, hey, should we blow this up? I think someone forgot to tell people. It's blown up. Where should Kevin Love want to go? Well, where do they need some shooting and maybe rebounding? A couple places come to mind, Stephen A. I'll pick the one I don't think you're going to pick. How about Philadelphia? You have a point guard who sometimes plays power forward because he can't shoot. Now, you have a 5. The thing about Kevin Love is once upon a time he was considered a big who can shoot. Oh, my God, isn't that weird, right? Oh, he could be like Dirk Nowitzki. He's not that big. Kevin Love is an NBA 6'9", but in reality a little over 6'7". He just can't defend smaller players. But he has a lot of skills that are useful. He's a great passer. He's a great rebounder. And he's a good shooter. At any position, he's a good shooter. At some positions, a very good shooter. So who do you need in Philadelphia? Well, a guy who, if you have a point guard who can play power forward at times because he can't shoot, maybe put him next to a power forward who can shoot. And the kind of center that Kevin Love needs to play with, Stephen A., is a guy who can block shots, post up, but doesn't need to post up because that's something Kevin Love can also do sometimes, can play an inside-out game and can also shoot. That's Embiid. So I think he fits in Philadelphia, and I think they're going to have need for a star when they strike out on Kawhi Leonard.
My answer would be the Portland Trailblazers. I think if you're Portland with all of these rumblings about what you're going to do with Damian Lillard or C.J. McCollum, because one of them have to go in order for you to get some kind of equitable compensation, I think that you try to hold on to both of those guys if you can get your hands on Kevin Love. Kevin Love, this is a Portland Trailblazers team that was 16th in points, that were like 19th in three-point shooting. Could they use his three-point shooting? Absolutely. They don't need his rebounding as much because they got enough dudes to do that. But they definitely need his shooting. They definitely need a viable, bona fide third offensive option who can interchange between a third and second offensive option when one of the other guys are out of the game. You need somebody that can score from your front line. You don't need to be the Blazers completely reliant upon your guards and Lillard and C.J. McCollum to come to the rescue. Somebody else with the experience who can handle the pressure, hitting big shots under pressure. I think that's Kevin Love. Obviously, if you're the Cleveland Cavaliers, you should do everything you can to make a move because you should clean house. LeBron is going. You're not going anywhere anyway. You need to build, and you need to use the assets that you have to create a multitude of assets for yourself. And Kevin Love is the one viable option that you have in that regard. You move him, you utilize him to get assets that you need because he's not somebody that's demanding to go to a specific place. There are a bevy of places he would be willing to go if the situation was relatively correct. And I think if you're Cleveland, you explore that.
I got another place
quick
for you guys.
One thing I want you to weigh in on this, Max, first. I mentioned that obviously he grew up in Oregon, but what about some kind of deal with C.J. McCollum, who's from Canton, Ohio, and could go back to Cleveland and play?
I mean, would you give up C.J. McCollum for Kevin Love?
No,
I would not.
I'm not saying it has to necessarily be a straight up, but just throwing that out there. I mean, they would both want to be in those cities.
I would think, they couldn't work at the money, but Houston would be a good fit, too. I think a better fit than Carmelo Anthony because Kevin Love is a much better rebounder and passer than Carmelo and doesn't need the ball as much. He's also a better outside shooter. So I think he's actually a better fit in Houston than Carmelo is, though the money wouldn't work the way Carmelo.
That's why I didn't bring it up. Money wouldn't work. You have to trade for him. That's why I didn't bring it up.
All right, guys. We'll leave it there. When we come back, the fellas will weigh in on how much longer Kawhi Leonard will be a member of the San Antonio Spurs. First Take coming right back. Anywhere. A new day and a new report about Kawhi Leonard. This time, ESPN Spurs reporter Michael C. Wright said on the back-to-back podcast that Kawhi was kept away from Spurs staffers on at least one occasion last season when they visited New York City to check on his rehab. Max, you guys are going on July break. You won't return until August. Much deserved. When you come back, will Kawhi still be a member of the Spurs?
Yes, he will be. What the Spurs are going to find over time is that because Popovich knows, has forgotten more basketball, not only than I'll never know, but than most people will ever know. But so he must understand, obviously, that the history of the NBA is you don't break a dollar into 4 quarters. Now, Kawhi's a devalued dollar. Not only is he coming off injury, but he wants to get out of there. And the league knows it. He has 1 year to free agency, and there's a belief that he'll only sign with LA or maybe even just the Lakers, even though now there's more information being put out there maybe to dilute that message, it seems to me. So Popovich is aware of that too. So where do you trade him? If Philadelphia won't even give up Markelle Fultz or something like that, what they're really saying is take these quarters for the dollar. The only team, it seems to me, with young assets that even have a chance to be worth at least 50-cent pieces, Ingram, Kuzma, someone like that, are the Lakers. And because other teams are also aware that it's likely he winds up with the Lakers in free agency, I think that they're offering less than they would otherwise, giving the Lakers, like in the end, the Spurs, Stephen A., will take the best deal for them, no matter where it comes from. And I just believe that'll come from LA.
Well, we better hope so. The reality is that I think that Kawhi Leonard will probably be gone because I think that over the next few weeks he's going to intensify his bantering, his rhetoric a little bit to make sure that the San Antonio Spurs don't entertain the idea of bringing him in to training camp and keeping him as a part of the San Antonio Spurs culture. Now, in fairness to a couple of the other Spurs, so much noise was made about Tony Parker leading a group of players to confront Kawhi. Tony Parker told our Mark Spears for the Undisputed that he's never had a problem with Kawhi Leonard. He just answered the question honestly about his injury and how it was more severe than Kawhi, and there was nothing more to it than that. He's got love and respect for him, et cetera, et cetera. And so we want to make sure we recognize that some of the San Antonio Spurs are obviously speaking up on Kawhi Leonard's behalf. What they'll have to respect is the fact that we're hearing that from you now, weeks, if not months, after we've been hearing that Kawhi was offended and want to be gone. So I don't know what all of that means or what have you, but I ultimately think that Kawhi is going to assert himself in such a way that he tries to force San Antonio's hands. And San Antonio might not want to deal with the mess, so they might take the assets rather than lose them for nothing.
I just think it's going to take more time than several weeks, guys, because if it is the Lakers, and let's say, and the Spurs aren't interested in Lonzo Ball, then the Lakers need to find a team that value Lonzo Ball for at least a first-round draft pick, which I think they can do. I think that's likely. They got to transact. They have to do that transaction, get the first-round pick, package it, negotiate, package it with either Ingram or Kuzma, etc. I think that's going to take some time.
And obviously the Spurs just lost Tony Parker, who will be joining Charlotte. And the Spurs and Pop put out this statement saying it's difficult to put into words how important Tony Parker has been to the Spurs franchise over the past 2 decades. From his first game in 2001 at age 19, TP has impressed and inspired us day after day, game after game, season after season with his passion, dedication, and desire. We are grateful to Tony for 17 years of truly amazing memories. He is headed east. Maybe Kawhi will be as well, guys, because coming up, that's where we're going. Is there a reason for fans to be down on the Eastern Conference without LeBron? The fellas debate that right after this quick commercial break. Don't go anywhere. Well, gentlemen, since LeBron James decided to take his talents to Los Angeles, there's been a lot of talk to the NBA changing the playoff format. Adam Silver said that ideally the 2 best teams should meet in the finals, but they'd have to figure out all the travel issues before any changes would happen. Stephen A., I'm going to start with you on this, because I remember a time when you were down on the entire NBA. Do you think everyone should be down on the Eastern Conference?
Not at all. I don't believe that. I mean, I know the Boston Celtics are the favorites. There's no question about it. But I would remind everybody about a 59-win team that was the #1 seed in the East, named the Toronto Raptors. Now, the likelihood of that being the case if Kyrie Irving and Gordon Hayward had not gone down might be different. But nevertheless, they did pull it off. And remember, their kryptonite was LeBron James. The fact that LeBron James is no longer in the Eastern Conference, as far as I'm concerned, elevates the Toronto Raptors within the East, because that's the only person they really worried about. They were hell-bent on going up against anybody else, believing that if they could get past LeBron, they could beat anybody else. And I think when you look at Lowry and DeRozan and Ibaka and Valanciunas and those boys, I think that they could give folks a run for their money. Their kryptonite was LeBron James. It wasn't anything else in the East.
I'm not that interested in Toronto unless Masai Ujiri has an ace up his sleeve. I just don't think the team is what it is. I don't think it's ever going to be great as currently constructed, but maybe he'll change things. But I think the East is really interesting. Little less so without LeBron, I suppose. It's one less team to look at. But Boston, I think, has a solid shot to win the title next year, period, including, again, obviously, against Golden State. I think Boston's going to be that good. I think Philadelphia, if they add another piece, is going, and not to mention Markelle Fultz develops, is going to be really good. Indiana's a very interesting team. Milwaukee is a very interesting team. That's 4 teams right there in the East that I'm interested in watching when they play. I mean, listen, it's not the Western Conference, but there is stuff to watch in the East.
Mm-hmm. All right, that gives some optimism. Guys, I have breaking news right now. I'm just seeing a tweet here, First Take Twitter account. Stephen A. Smith and Max Kellerman, you guys are on vacation officially. How does it feel?
I'll let you know when I get back.
Oh, really? You're going to get... Where are you going, Stephen A.? I thought you want to tell me. I was about to pull up a chair and an umbrella.
I never reveal where I'm going, ever.
Oh, so mysterious.
I'm going to have to figure out who I'm going to beat in debates every day between now and then. Usually I have Stephen A. around,
Probably your 3-year-old daughters. All right,
Take
for Kevin
this
Reed
time
and Jeff
to learn.